We'll call Criminal Justice Public Safety Committee to order at 4 minutes before 10 o'clock. First order of business is to accept the minutes of our previous meeting. Moved by Supervisor Simpson, seconded by Supervisor McGowan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Up first is District Attorney. District Attorney Carasone, you have the floor.
Thank you. Today, really all I want to do is address our budget. I know we had our budget meeting, and some of what you're going to hear may sound a little repetitive, but feel free to interrupt me with questions, and I'm just going to take off really with what I think is the easiest piece. The way our budgets are structured, there's really three. One of them is called narcotics controls. That's for our investigator position that we have, and I'll just give you a quick overview. The next one is our crime victim assistance program, and lastly is our main budget. So, as I see it, and you've heard me speak of the new laws that are coming in. Criminal Procedure Law 245 is the whole new discovery laws, and there's bail reform. I feel like a broken record, but these things all were passed in around April of this year, and they take effect January 1 of this year. It's a pretty radical overhaul of our criminal justice system, and frankly, it's going to change the way, change things for DA's offices, police, defense counsel. It's kind of a radical departure from what has been the status quo. So, that is going to impact my budget requests. The first one, that it's going to impact the workload, but I'm not asking for any more, so why don't I start there? And that is the investigative narcotics control budget.
I'm sorry, Jason, what page are you on? I've got a whole stack of pages here.
Here's our broken...
It's going to be page 92. No,
Sorry, so you got a
69.
packet, and when you look, the last budget, it'll be just a few pages, it's right at the back end, and you'll see it starts with Department Narcotics Control-BA, and the total request is $69,217. So I guess I'm going from the back to the
Very last pages.
Yeah, that's the report.
I used to take exams that way. If I couldn't figure out an answer, I'd go to the back and start in reverse and see where I ended up. Our DA investigator position, it's a singular position, but it's covered by three retired police investigators. The benefit of having three for one is we always have coverage. So if someone's on vacation, another will step in. So we never have, if you have one person manning that position, you'd obviously, when they're on vacation, you'd have no one manning the position. We are not asking for any more. We're asking to leave that alone, keep it exactly as is. They are going to have more work. I've been talking to them and trying to prepare this for next year. So they have a lot of roles. They deal with ignition interlock. For people who get ignition interlock, they do with compliance. One of the things that our investigators have to do is criminal history. So they run criminal histories. They have to get fingerprinted and permission to do that through the Department of Criminal Justice Services. Starting next year, we won't only be running criminal histories for someone accused of a crime under next year's laws. We must run them for every single case for every single witness, potential witness of a crime. You can imagine the numbers that could be looking like. And it's not just a crime. It can include violation level offenses, aggravated unlicensed operator, yes.
And is that part of the discovery, part of the
Yes.
news?
So this looks pretty voluminous. I have included a little summary that I made of the discovery laws, and then I've included the discovery laws for you. So if you pull those out for your bedtime reading, they're available to you. But that is a requirement. We've never had that requirement before, and I've been in touch with DCJS to discuss how we're going to implement it, because they have strict rules on us giving these reports out. I don't have all the answers yet. Under our current system, we have limitations on disclosure, but we have certain requirements of disclosure, so we handwrite convictions off of each sheet. But generally, we're looking at not a lot, and you're talking about more in a trial stage. Next year, it's going to be every case, every witness. So, if you have a case with 5 people there, that's 5 criminal histories plus a defense. That is going to be handled by our investigators on top of their regular caseload, I hope. So, why don't we just start right there? That one, we're not really seeking any change or any increase. We're asking to keep that as it is. Anybody have questions on that? I may be going from the back to the front again. So the next one is the Crime Victims Assistance Program, and that's budget account code A1168. And you'll see Department 2020 request is 201,503. Once everyone's gotten tracked down to that. This is a program that's been running not for as long as I've been here, but I've been here about 20 years, so most of the 20 years I've been here, it started to come into effect. We have been very, very fortunate to be awarded this grant money from the Office of Victim Services for years. It has funded this program largely. It is a match funding program. We've had good luck and been able to do some match through a large influx of interns and space. This year, for the first time, those numbers changed. Our OBS money that came in from the grant changed. You'll see I've attached as a letter. The total for the next 3 years is around $450,000 for the county to operate the program. Sounds like great news. It's not as great as we wanted. What I learned from contacting OBS is that there were many more programs across the state that sought this money, and they granted it and they spread it out. So instead of seeing an increase in grant funds, we actually saw a decrease. So in response to the decrease, what I'm trying to do, and if the county approves this, is streamline our budget the best that I can, but keep our staff that we have been using this year. So what you'll see is last year's adopted budget was $215,661. This year, I've been able to get it down to $201,503, which sounds great, but I'm going to be explaining to you how this all works. What that group does is everything related to victims. So they're going to be in touch with our victims. They're a liaison for our victims. I'm sure some of you are aware of the Care Center. The Care Center is where when victims of crime, children report, they go to the Care Center. Our crime victim advocate will go to that Care Center for the interview with law enforcement and hopefully an assistant DA if we have one available. Minoa Finito's here. She's the director of the program. She has recently renewed her certification as a forensic interviewer. That's a week-long program. There's some new processes. She's vital to kind of our sex assaults and victim assault cases. On top of what their typical duties are, a part-time person works on restitution for all hosts of crimes. So, you can have restitution, frankly, in a death case where there's restitution all the way down to a larceny, something small. They gather all that information, including receipts and evidence, so that we can hopefully recover those monies for victims. Next year, bail reform is coming. Bail reform is going to change the number of people that are incarcerated. I think some things I've read, they say 90% of people arrested now will be released and not in custody pending. That's a pretty big change from the current law. I'll give you an example, burglary of a home. Currently, say someone's a convicted rapist from New Jersey, and they come up, they burglarize a home, they get caught in the act, they resist arrest, the people run from the home, so we have eyewitnesses to it. You'd expect bail in a case like that now, because you could look at their criminal history, their lack of ties to the community, all those factors. Next year, starting January 1, the court, under that fact pattern, can't set bail. That person will be released, and they'll presumably go back to their home state, potentially. We don't know. My experience with victims of crime is that they have certain expectations, and even now they expect people to be, well, I witnessed him, he committed the crime, he confessed, why isn't he in jail? Well, those numbers are going to go up. So I expect there's going to be a larger demand on the victim advocacy program than ever before for people that don't understand these new rules, and frankly, some of them are fearful, stressed, concerned. We have to explain this. Part of the new law requires that we, the prosecutor, give a list of all potential witnesses and contact information, which would include the victim of that crime. So they're going to have to understand that the law now requires their name and their contact information to be released to the defendant. You can imagine that may increase the demands on the program. On top of that, within these new laws, is an avenue for the defendant to seek permission to enter the home, in that burglary example, to inspect the victim's home and space. Certainly, we don't know how frequently that's going to happen, but that's new. That didn't exist before. Obviously, in those scenarios, the victim will be notified, our office will be notified, and there'll be a legal argument, yes.
Did you say the defendant?
Correct.
Goes,
It's a really big change from what we're accustomed to. So, right, so the defendants through their attorney, or if they're representing themselves, can make application on a burglary victim, a rape victim, if it happened in the victim's home. We're going to have legal arguments over that. Those would be new hearings that we've never had before. I anticipate that if you were the victim of one of those crimes and you got that notice, you'd be calling our office saying, what the hell's going on, what's going on? And we're going to have to try to give them answers. So I expect next year there's going to be a lot more questions, and we're not going to have all the answers because the reasoning behind the laws, we didn't create these laws, so we're just going to explain them to them and try to make them understand the realities of the laws. So when you go to, so my good news is, Supervisor Wild has a question.
Jason, I have to go back in your conversation about what's going on with this laws. Have we communicated to the public in general to maybe create an outcry on Albany?
So I'm part of the District Attorneys Association of New York, and we are going to Albany on a regular basis and having meetings, including seemingly every day. One of the comments and one of the things we're expressing is you created all these laws, but there's no funding. There's been no funding, so you're laying it at the feet of the counties, putting public safety at the feet of the counties. This isn't just Warren County. This isn't a Warren County. This is a New York State issue. You'll hear that they've created a system of notification for defendants where they can choose method of notification for reminders of court, and they must be reminded of all their court appearances. And if they fail to make their court appearance before a warrant can issue, they have to then be reminded that they missed it and given an opportunity. There's no program that was created yet. We're suggesting that the state should fund a program. Obviously, that's something that's being discussed, but that doesn't exist. And so I know that I see Don Lehman here. I know he's written about this several times. I've spoken about it here. I was on a TV program where I spoke about it. But when I talk to people individually, most of them say, I've never heard of this. They don't know what I'm referring to. So that's a concern as well when you talk about such a big change is going to happen, and I think people's expectations and what they're accustomed to, they're not going to maybe be prepared when you're probably you don't think about being the victim of a crime until you are, or you know someone that is, right? And then you go, what are these rules? And then we're the ones that are supposed to provide the answers and the assistance on our side, just as the public defender's office will work with the defendants. So I do know that there is a lot of meetings that have been going on. We had meetings before the law passed. We asked for meetings, I should say. We met with some people. These laws passed and were signed in, and this is what starts January 1.
But these laws have passed, so there's no way that any of this can be rescinded in the near term. So, in essence, my sense is the public is going to be at risk because of some of these changes. That's the message I'm hearing from you.
Well, I mean, do I have concerns? Of course I do. There's a lot of concerns. So the example I give with the burglary, that happens, and that probably may not happen in Warren County. You hope it doesn't. You always hope we don't have crime, but we know the reality. And you'll hear when I talk about extradition later on, I've got concerns. So you take that example, the person who's from another state who's released, they're responsible for coming back to court. Sometimes people who have prior records and who are from other states aren't the most responsible people sometimes. And a percentage of them may not come back. And now we're talking about extradition, and how do we get them, how do we deal with that? So, yeah, I don't come here to be the bearer of bad news. I guess I'm just a bearer of news. So what we've done on this budget, to the best of my ability, is cut every place that we can. If you go to page 2 of 3, some of the cuts are large, some are minor. And the reason that we're doing that, we're trying to retain the employees, because in the end, a piece of paper an envelope, a letter, isn't going to do what a person can do to help someone who's in need. With these cuts, which I'd say, in my view, are fairly dramatic, it's still, you're going to see an increased cost to the county if this is approved. And the reason is because what I had said in my last meeting is we had a screaming good deal, and now it's just a really good deal. The cost to keep the program running under this proposal would be $55,341 for 2020. That gets you the entire program, the operational expenses, and the employees. So positives. One, we keep it going. Two, we our match. We don't have this issue with match that needs home state. So we've always been trying to, in an effort to come up with non-monetary matches, has been a tremendous amount of work on our end to keep that going. By taking these steps, if the county agrees to this, then that portion of we will have the match. It'll be a financial match for the most part. And so that's it. If you want me to get into any specific details, line by line.
Looks like you severely cut travel and education.
Yeah, so where does that really affect us? It sounds like when we think of travel, like in education, the people going to training. That's some of these lines compose a big group. Really where that's going to hit us, unfortunately, is in the past we've had to help victims who couldn't afford travel, to provide travel, to provide housing. That's not going to be there. Now, as I indicated before, there are other OBSs spread this money around to other programs. We're not even at that stage yet, but if we're in a stage of need, we may reach out to other programs and see if they have any avenues to help. Because we've had victims that simply, as you know, your victims can have no financial resources. I remember a woman was a victim of repeated domestic violence. She lived down near the city. She lived on her own. She had children. For her to travel and stay here, very difficult. We have the ability to use funds that, frankly, those funds are drying up. We had another witness who was, I believe, in North Carolina. We got her a train ticket, and we had our investigator pick her up at the train station and get a hotel room by the office for a trial. But all of that costs money, and many of our victims don't have it. And then, once they've left the state, frankly, some of them don't want to come back. They just say, look, that's behind me. I don't want to deal with that. But we also don't want the person who committed the offense to just not be held accountable if they should be. So that's kind of one of the more painful cuts in this when you look at it. And again, the reason that we're doing, you all say, look, I object, you can't cut that. I'm not going to argue, and we'll put it back in. But we really want to retain the people if we can. Interestingly, our budget from OBS runs till September 30th. So we would essentially be rehiring our part-time position. Our part-time position is going to dry up essentially September 30th of this year, and then we're going to hopefully renew it next year.
And as a clarification on this, on the 100s personal services, all of those get put into the budget at a later date. Right now, you're carrying them over as they were in 2019.
Correct. So in other words, as you know, I've asked for, in all of these, there's a cost of living increase. We're asking for that. So we could see a change in those numbers if the county pursues cost of living increase. So that's why those numbers look like that now.
And your proposed budget right now is 6% less than it was last year. Crimes victims.
Yeah. So I didn't do the math, but it's 14,000 and change lower. But I want to be transparent here. The county expense does go up because our grant funding, while it's great, isn't as great as it was. Any other questions on that? Okay, so the big budget, and probably the biggest ask. And this is, I guess we did from back to front. So this is the big portion. So this is our DA budget. I think, honestly, every single change that we've made is related to the new laws. And the one revenue change, so our revenues remain the same. The one change is we were really fortunate to get a legislative initiative grant. It's not one you apply for. It's given occasionally. We didn't get it this year. It was $10,000 last year. But otherwise, all of our revenues have remained the same. Our expenses. When you go to budget worksheet on this one, page 2 of 3, we've tried to remain static where we can. Obviously, we don't control the hundreds lines, and I'll address that at some point. When you look at 260, under the 260 equipment, last year we had $9,000 in the adopted budget for equipment. This year we tried to reduce that by $6,000 to $3,000. Again, I want to make sure I'm clear. The reason we had $9,000 was because we had that legislative grant. We were able to use those monies. The reason I'm still seeking a little bit of money is because, let me touch on this. In an effort to get ready for next year, we have been, and I know some of you heard me talk about this, we are trying to transition the entire office to digital filing systems. They call it DEMS, Digital Evidence Management System. That works within our prosecutor's case management system software. We get the software for free. In order to digitize everything, we have been, on top of being a DA's office, we're also a full-time IT department, I guess, with a bunch of people that don't know what that means. And so we're trying to digitize everything. We're trying to get everything in an electronic format. Friday, our copier that scans went down. So we realized that could put us in a real big bind. So the $3,000 is hopefully to have scanning ability and have additional ability to capture digital information as it's coming into the office. It's coming in a lot of forms right now. I'm working with the Sheriff's Office, State Police, Glens Falls Police, to work the lab to see if we can change the way we receive some information, but that's going to take time. So the $3,000 that we're asking for would allow us to have enough equipment that as things come in, we are in a position to digitize where necessary. So while it is a decrease, our revenues did go down to $10,000. When you go into increases, legal transcript fees, and you'll see that it was the $55,000 was adopted, and now we're looking at $61,700. That's a $6,700 increase. CPL 245, you'll see, if you do choose to read it, says now, in any case that goes to grand jury, we must get a transcript and have it disclosed to defense within 15 days. Under the current law, we're not permitted to disclose the transcript without court order or unless it's what's called rosario for a hearing. I did two things. One, we ran our average transcripts for the last 3 years, and then I contacted our transcriptionist, our stenographer, and she wrote a letter, which we have in here, that she sees that there'll be a 25% increase in cost for her to do what the new law requires. So based on that, it's a $6,700 increase to meet that. Now, grand jury, from year to year, changes. We get a big case with a big presentation, which we've had. You're talking about a large transcript. The reason I'm not doing 25% of the total, because there's other things that go into that. We do hearings where there's transcripts. We do trials. There's trial transcripts for appeals. Sometimes with video evidence, rarely, but occasionally we'll get it transcribed on the bigger cases. So I'm not doing 25% of the total. I'm doing 25% of just the grand jury increase. So that's why you might do the math and say, well, that's 25% is even larger than that. We're only doing it for that grand jury portion. That is a new mandate the state has passed. Our stenographer believes she can meet those timelines and meet that burden, and I hope so, because she's a real value. She's been with the office for longer than I have. She's been assisting the office for longer than I have. Other things that have changed. When you look at travel, education, conference, again, sometimes I think these descriptors aren't great. Our extradition comes out of that, amongst other things, mileage for all the attorneys that drive around and staff. We looked at our average on extraditions, and it was $2,500 a year. And we're really not doing a ton. We've done a couple of extraditions a year on average. I've increased this by $5,000. I hope we don't use $1 of it, and everybody comes to court, and we never have to extradite. And I will tell you, we don't extradite every case. But there are serious cases that require it, and I'm trying to budget that. And again, this is like a crystal ball guess, and I feel it's extremely conservative. But with these new bail reforms, I think it's unrealistic to think everyone will come. And I think it's realistic to think some won't. We've got to be prepared to address that. County law requires the county to fund those things. To be honest, when I first started this, I didn't realize that was a county. We tried to see, can we share the expense, and the law says you can't. You're responsible for extradition costs. So that's that line. If you go down, and it says contract. Contract is, and you'll see there's a fairly lengthy, maybe 2-3 page email from the New York Prosecutors Training Institute. That's gone from $1,700 to $5,000. I don't know if we're going to need all that. They're recommending that amount for our size county. That is that digital evidence management system storage. So everything is stored in an encrypted process with, the way it's been explained to me, it's encrypted through Amazon and it's held in multiple sites so that if there's a failure in one place, we're safe. And what they're developing is, I'll call it cold storage. As the case gets old, it will then transmit into a lower cost storage so that you're not carrying that high level, what some might call a high level cost. That will allow our digital files to continue. I think over time, that's going to be some savings because, yes, sorry, I'm just going.
So do you still have to carry on paper files as well?
Currently, we have both. I'm trying to get away from both, but that transition's a process. So I'm expecting, like, within maybe a year from now, when you talk to me, I'll say, hey, we're mostly paperless.
And retention time for these files?
Well, here's the beauty of it. It's digital retention. So currently, we're retaining in the basement, and there's a cost to that. So let's say that a defendant makes what's called a 440 motion 7 years after his case concluded. We can't house that. We have to request the basement. Some from the basement does a search for the file. This paper file, eventually if found, comes up, and then we can respond to us, and then it's delivered back down. In the future, we'll be able to digitally type in that name. It'll find it. Because it's in, I'm calling it cold digital storage, it'll be a slower transfer, but that's fine. It's going to free up the basement storage, and it's going to free up our storage, and it's going to make us faster. So the whole point of this, first of all, I think it's the future, and I think it's going to make, it's my only way that I can see to comply with the new laws, essentially. And you'll see in the email, they said an office of our size, they recommend $5,000 for the 2020 year. What does a file look like? Well, body cam, let's also have body cam. So every single case with a body cam, we have to get those videos. I was just looking at one, I think 5 officers responded to the scene. That's 5 videos. They're all stored in here. Before we get thumb drives, and we would store them on thumb drives, and then we have to burn thumb drives and then give out thumb drives. I see Marcy here, and we've been slowly giving them some digital evidence through our new system where they get a link and they can just download what they need. It's a great program. We are just in the infancy stage of getting it up and running and figuring it out. I want to compliment Mike Bolden and Rob Hossford in that group who are helping us on some of the other issues that we're having. I got an email from Mike this morning and he said, it's one more thing on the list, and I thanked him. So he's helping us get some of those things going. Now, what I haven't touched on is really what is the big ask. We currently, based on our efforts in the last few months, are not in a position to do the work with what we have, even with these changes. And I frankly think I may be, and I've been told by others, so I'll be honest, I may be being a little conservative, but we are asking for some help. An additional legal clerk and an additional attorney. Currently, you can see in there, our attorneys, if you look at the state, I was just sent maybe 2 months ago, stats for the state. The average attorney, according to these stats, has 178 felony misdemeanor cases per attorney. Warren County is 7th busiest in the state of New York, and we have 256 per attorney. If we have an 8th, we're still going to be well above average, and that doesn't even consider the new responsibilities. So the new responsibilities, things that we've never had to do before, every single case that we get requires discovery, disclosure, and discovery doesn't mean what it means today. A file, so I saw Bud over here, and Jim LaFarner, Terry Cuomo, they're all been in law enforcement a long time. What a file looks like today doesn't meet the standard next year. It's not good enough under the new laws. That's going to put a big burden on sheriff's departments, state police, all these agencies, and I'll speed up. And sorry, I'm going way over. Once they compile the 2020 file, The prosecutor then has to certify that it's everything that they have in every case. And we then have to create a witness list for every case. We have to get an evidence list and indicate is it constructively possessed or otherwise. We have to give it things that are never done before are now new. So we've never had a certificate of compliance. That's now required in every case before we can proceed. We can't even be ready on a case under the law until we've got that done. That's in a 15-day time limit. So my hope is, and I'll be honest, I may be coming back and no one wants to see me again midstream, but we're going to try to make it do with these additions if you grant them. But I don't know if we can, and I don't think anyone knows. So we're going to try.
So on your salary schedule right now,
Yes.
then you're looking for a legal clerk, too, and a DA on call pay?
No, with an additional, so they had us put this into a separate document.
Yeah, there's,
So it's not
so the
reflected.
additional is not reflected on the schedule yet.
Right, it's not reflected on the schedule yet. So, you'll see, right, so it would be an 8th assistant district attorney and a legal clerk, number 5, they call it. You know, I'm sure you've read the paper, you've seen what's going on in other counties, and you've heard about this. You know, I don't want to overstate it, I don't want to understate it. This is a radical change. And for us to comply and not have cases dismissed, this is, to me, I feel like the bare minimum that gives us a chance, and I don't know. I frankly don't know. We won't know until we start doing it. You know, obviously I have fears that keep me up at night, but that we won't be able to, but this is what I'm hoping will at least get us to a point where we can be in compliance.
So are those asks and the 1,000,003 for, no, not at all? Okay.
It's not in there.
No, it's not reflected. You're told to just put it in, and then if it's something that you disagree to, it'll be added.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, Jason, I just did some simple math. Your salaries are going to increase over 7%. Projected budget for next year is 7% higher in salaries.
Yeah.
Well, as you recall, there was a new salary schedule that came midstream, so I think it makes things look a little, so
Okay.
under the county, so it looks, I think, a little bigger than it actually is what it is. I mean, it was a big change
It was a big change.
in April. And if you look around now, where we are brings us close to our surrounding, well, close to some of our surrounding counties, and well beneath some of them. But it allowed us to retain a couple of people. We were so far beneath the standards, frankly. It was necessary, and as I said before, extremely appreciated. The county came up with a salary schedule for attorneys, and while we're on that subject, one of the things that I was asked to do, which was new this year, is do an evaluation for every single attorney in the office, and you'll see that I've done that, and I put a lot of work into that, including comments for each and every individual in each category. All of them, well, just by my first statement, which is that they have the 7th highest caseload in the state, all of them are doing a remarkable job. And based on these things, I have recommended them for the merit increase, of course. And when you see, I think, what they're doing and what they're being asked to do. So now, on top of what they do every day, I'm having them help me build this whole new system so that we can try to comply with 245 next year. So frankly, I go to them and I say, hey, where are we? How many, you know, the staff, how many old files have you scanned in yet? What letter are you on? And we're meeting every single week in just on this topic alone, every week. Who has gotten me a form? Who's done a certificate of compliance form? Who has gotten a way for us to create these witness lists from the software? And we're not there yet. So it's a big burden that's being put on the feet of them. And I have heard that some prosecutors feel it's too much and it's something that they don't want to take on. I haven't heard it in my own office, but it's a big strain. I mean, there's a lot. The state has put a big ask on our department and on the police department especially.
Any other questions from the board for the DA? Continue.
All right. So those are the changes. I know I mentioned in our first meeting the cost of living it's given. You know, I feel that should apply to our budgets. The merit increases and the staffing change kind of one to get a concordance with what's around. What's curious is, I told you about our numbers. If we get this change, what I'm hearing is offices across the state are all going to be increasing their staffing too. So it may not really make it. We still may fall into that higher echelon, but we won't know until we get into the new year.
Do you have space for number 8?
Yes.
Supervisor Wild?
Mr. Chairman, thanks. Jason, I totally understand the percentage increase from last year. I'm a little leery about adding full-time staff for the reason is we don't understand what this is going to bring for us in the future. Can we do it with temporary help? Because
No,
obviously there's a lot of changes. No, we can't. There's no temporary.
There's no way. Let me, and I don't mean to, I have looked at, this is honestly, when I say I feel I'm under-asked, people, I've had meetings where I kind of did this presentation and they said, you're not asking for enough. You're never going to be able to do it. How can we do this? It is, sorry.
That's okay. I think Administrator has something to say.
Yeah, just for the moment, setting aside the changes for next year, in terms of your current workload, what's your caseload like compared to other offices around the state?
There's 62 counties. The stats I got said ADAs in Warren County are the 7th highest caseload in the state of New York per attorney. So 178 is the average. We're doing 256.
Without the new stuff?
Without the new laws, correct. So I feel like we're already grinding. So if you forget the new laws, and if we got an 8, that would bring us to, I think, if I did around 222. So we would be about 40 cases more than the average. That's why I say, in my view, it's a lot. It's a conservative ask. And these new laws, most cases, as you know, don't go to trial. You know, they go through different stages, they get resolved. This new rule essentially says, get this case into a trial-ready posture, witness list, which has never been done, compliance. You know, we have just on the criminal side, so misdemeanor felony, about 1,800 a year on average. That's not everything. The thing I haven't touched on is traffic. So we get about 19,000 plus traffic tickets a year. We handle and prosecute traffic tickets in Warren. When you look at those numbers, some counties farm out traffic. We do all our own appeals. Some counties farm out and pay separately for appellate attorneys. So when you look at those numbers, we have 2 attorneys that work on appeals on top of everything else. Frankly, it skews our load higher. As you know, we serve as special prosecutors in other counties to save money, frankly. I'm traveling tomorrow to Saratoga County as a special prosecutor. They do the same for us. So we have sort of this arrangement where different counties will come in and handle a conflict for us, and we'll do one for them. You know, I've looked at this every way I can, and I'm trying to deal with what is frankly a very stressful, very radical change to what's being required. In order, so I think here's the kicker. For us to prosecute a case under the new law, under the current law, I can go with a few pieces of paper, and if it's enough, I can appear at court and say, people are ready for trial. And that stops a clock, the 30-30 clock. Under the new law, until I have done a full discovery and witness list, and every video, and any note, and any 911 recording, and any other evidence, and done a certificate of compliance, I can't even say I'm ready. So that clock could be running that whole time. Those cases can be dismissed in misdemeanors 90 days, felonies 6 months. There's also penalty for noncompliance with the 15-day rule. So that's why I say I may be coming back asking for more. And you may say no, but I'm going to have to ask. Someone said I should have been doing it now. But I'm trying to unroll this in a way where we can see what are we capable of doing in 2020 with that. Here's the other thing, is we all realize the rule kicks in January 1. If I start with 2 new people in January 1, they're not ready to go. I now have to get them up to speed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, I really appreciate your putting in the hire dates of your staff. I think that speaks to the good longevity that your department enjoys. And as you were saying, no 2 departments are exactly the same. If you go to Saratoga County, Washington County, and the learning curve getting people up to speed on your department oftentimes includes extra money. I would much rather look at this in September than February, and happy ask then, because then we've got to relook at the budget and all those types of things. So I appreciate the fact that you're giving this information to us now.
Well, and I tried to come earlier and talk about these new laws because, like I said, it's so dramatic, and if you're not in this world, you might not feel it. It doesn't maybe sound that. And I tell you, right now, we haven't had a case where I felt we could say we're compliant. Yeah, because now I'm saying get us new cases, and because on the law enforcement side, they have these new responsibilities that they have to do. So, I'm sorry.
County Administrator?
Just to comment on these changes that the state made, this was done at the very end of the state budget process. This was put into the revenue bill, which is where all the junk goes that they don't want you to read before the budget's passed. We had maybe a day, 2 days of having the actual language that's been enacted into the law available to us to analyze it, and it took a couple of months for the DA's Association and the Sheriff's Association and the various professional associations that are going to be affected by this to have the time to really analyze what this means. So it was done, no debate, no opportunity to oppose it. It's law, and then we figure out what it means afterwards, and it's ridiculous.
Supervisor Garrity, did you have?
Yeah, I appreciate the work you're putting into it. I mean, you're putting this work in while you're maintaining the other part of the office right now, and then you've got your staff looking at each of these areas and trying to figure out what impact you're going to have for next year. So I really appreciate the work you're putting into us. You've done a very good job laying this out for us twice. You've really laid it out very well for us, and we know that it's going to affect the sheriff's department. We know public defender is going to have a role in this, maybe even probation. So I appreciate what you've done, but I also appreciate that the office keeps running and the cases keep coming. So
They do keep coming. They do keep coming.
it's going to be one of these: pay me now or pay me later.
Supervisor McGowan, and then Supervisor Wild.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank you for your honesty. Thanks for holding back on saying what you really meant. Kevin, I agree with you. Jason, I know you felt a little nervous coming in. Let me tell you, your presentations is coming in with what you have to do for what you really don't know what has to be done because of these new roles, but it's going to affect probation, it's going to the public defender, the sheriff's office, it's affecting all of us. And I really, you have brought it up previously, you have warned us, you're going to have to do this. I know your office is crammed and overworked, and I really would hate to see anybody getting burned out too at the same time. And so far, I think you've been spot on warning us what's coming up and not, throwing it down our throats at the last minute. And I'd go with your recommendations.
Supervisor Wild.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Jason, I'm going to pair up with these guys. I support what you're doing. I know that it has to be highly stressful because of the fact that so much of this is unknown. Where I'd like to go with this is to understand the systems piece of this. We had a conversation yesterday at one of our committee meetings about a workflow process that our Board of Elections is going to be using. How tight is Mike Colvin working with us in the Sheriff's Department and your department to say that where the data originates, it doesn't have to be touched again. It kind of just flows right into you, and it's just part of that piece. So I'm sure that there's some training and some understanding and some systems work that needs to be done, which is a big part of helping you be successful with this. Where do we stand, and do we need more help in that area also?
Okay, perfect. So part of this, and the reason that it's taking a while, is this got dropped. We saw a potential that this law might occur. We tried to get our words heard. The law was created, and here it is. So now we're saying, how do we respond? When I came in to BDA, I wanted to get to a point where we had digital filing and all that, but we're so busy to find time to do that. And I decided we have no choice. We must do it if we're going to try to comply. So here's what I'm trying to do, and I'm hopeful Mike's role on our side has been not huge, but he's got an important role. What our concept is that we want to create a system where the law enforcement has one electronic avenue to deposit files to our office digitally. And I was just talking to the sheriff and Jim LaFar before we came in here, and I've been talking to them leading up to this. How are we going to pull this off? Our hope is there's going to be essentially an electronic bucket for the sheriff's office, state police, Glens Falls. Their files will go in, I'm hoping, electronically into that bucket. We'll be able to retrieve them and then distribute them inside of our system. The beauty of the system is that once we get that, and that's it, I'm probably minimizing it. We have to list every associated person, every victim, contact information. Building a file is a lot of work now. It's more work than normal. It's not just sticking a piece of paper in a file. So you're building this electronic file, which the legal clerks are starting to do, and we're still developing what that looks like. We're working with Nifty to change some of the pieces of the software to make it better. Mike Colvin's trying to create these FTP sites so that they'll have this secure, encrypted way for the evidence to go in. Then I can do what's called e-discovery. Inside that software, I can select items that they're entitled to. I can put them in e-discovery, and Marcy's office will get a unique link with a unique password for that case, where they can then go in and retrieve. In the old days, we'd have people at photocopiers copying everything. We'd be printing photographs. We'd be burning discs, burning thumb drives, making copies for the court. Now, if it works, and we get to that stage, the sheriff's department will be delivering this package, but it's going to be a lot of work for them to get that package to where it needs to be in 2020. We're going to be creating certificates of compliance, witness lists, all these things, and getting all that data, and we're going to be turning that over to defense. Everything I'm talking about has nothing to do with prosecuting a case, right? I haven't talked about preparing witnesses, reviewing evidence, going through all these body cams and all this video. All that is still there. This is just so that we can have the opportunity to prosecute a case. So that's that workflow. That's our hope. We're going to have a system for it to flow in, so we can have it and flow it out to defense. Because that's really the idea is defense is going to be getting, my joke, and I don't think anyone appreciates my humor, is, hey, defense, you're going to have a better file than us, because you'll have our file, and you've got your client who you can talk to, and we can't talk to defendants. So that's that workflow that we're trying to develop.
So just to
Supervisor,
follow,
one follow-up.
I'm just curious, who's managing this workflow piece? Is that you in your office?
Me, yep.
Can we get you some help for that?
Number 8.
I'm not, you're talking about clerks to help manage some of this stuff. I'm talking about somebody that understands workflow and computers and data storage, and the library system has a way to characterize data. So you have the right tags on the data so that you can assign it to this person or that person or whatever. It's complicated. I've done a little bit of this in my career, but not enough to know. But I know that it's complicated. You really should have someone who kind of understands that. Can we get consultants?
Maybe we can take up that discussion later where...
Yeah, I'm sorry. Here's the reality is I'm working with the New York Prosecutors Training Institute, who has an IT department. And I've been on the phone with them a lot, and I call them and I say, I don't understand this. And it's been a lot of work, and we're not close to done. Everyone in the office is trying to work on this every day, and frankly, honestly. But we are tagging information. Of course, there's a lot of sensitive information, so we just can't have everyone in there. But we've got an idea of a system. I've talked to law enforcement. I think they're supportive of doing this. They recognize what's coming. And we're hopeful we can roll it out. I want to really be rolling it out sooner than January 1, so we can actually work out the case. Sorry that went way longer than I planned.
No, that's okay.
We're interested in
have
sharing us again, Jason.
That's right. It's good to be informed because you do have an important department here, and the request is 12% above last year's. So we recognize the severity of the issues in front of you. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Supervisor McGowan?
Yeah, just one quick question to follow up on Mike Weil. That might be something that maybe, all the departments could put a little budget in there to get, that one person to catalog all this stuff to make it easier
Well, I can say Mike Holden's terrific, and he used to work, and so I think he's assisting, and you may hear from Bud and Jim, whoever presents, you may be hearing a little bit about what they're going to be doing on their side. I had a meeting with them regarding 911 recordings, and, you know, I mean, people were staring at me in terror, and I said, yeah, it's terrifying what's now being called upon, and they're working on it.
Well, I'll ask the county administrator, will there be any coordination to help out with this? then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, coordination, just to follow up on what you
Yeah.
say, because it is important. That's where our government efficiencies come in, is the workflow, and especially when you're overloaded. So, and I think that was what you were getting at in your question here.
Well,
How do we make this so
I'm-
efficient, and as we tie in everybody that's related to it?
Just to expand upon it, I'm really looking to see if we can hire some help for Jason to do the high-level stuff. Let him continue to do his staff, but someone to help work with the Association of District Attorneys, or whatever association it is, to be able to pull that together and just focus on the system and workflow. Forget running the operation and everything else, but just be that one technical contact person to make this happen. I don't know if Mike Colvin has the bandwidth or not, but we need, in my opinion, with the amount of time we have left in the calendar year, I'm sensing a big risk here.
Well, I will tell you that we've been working on it. We didn't start
I know
doing
you
it,
have.
right? We've been going strong, so we're, you know, we're every week we meet, and every week we're a lot further than we were the week before. And I think Mike thinks he'll have my FTP sites up by the end of this week, he's hoping. Once I have those, then it's going to be the trainings with all of our partners in law enforcement, which I'll be conducting, and kind of coordinating with them and trying to find a system that's going to work. I think we will. We've got really sharp people here. Everyone's working very hard. Everyone sees it. And no one's unaware of what's going on within the system.
They have it under control.
They have good stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Keep up the great work.
Director of Probation, you're up next.
Good morning. Before I get into the budget, I have one resolution request. And there's a little bit of a change from the resolution request that was sent out, just happens to do with the date. What I would like to do is request a resolution to contract with Automon for case management system. Prior to this year, this was on state contract, and we did not need an individual contract to affect payment to Automon. But Automon's maintenance agreement is no longer under state contract. The money we put in there is budgeted every year. So this is just a little bit of change. Change to the amendment are the dates. The commencement date would be August 18th of 19 to August 17th of 2020. Again, these are things that we've had in our budget for the last 15 years. And the reason we need this resolution is because it's not on the state contract anymore.
Okay. Brought to the floor by Supervisor Hogan, seconded by Supervisor Driscoll. Any discussion? Supervisor McGowan.
I'd just like to go on the record, I'd be abstaining from this vote. My wife works for this department.
Okay, thank you. Then any further discussion? We'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, so getting into our budgets, they're laid out in the, we have three different budgets. The first is the probation budget, which has the majority of staff and budget expenditures within our department. Before I start that, we can get into that. One of the requests we're looking to do this year is to add a new probation officer trainee to deal with our Raise the Age caseload. Raise the Age went into effect last year on October 1, 2016. In a few weeks, the 17-year-olds are going to go into. The request is to have an additional probation officer trainee to deal exclusively with Raise the Age cases.
And is that reflected in your 100s on the proposed budget?
It is not. That is a new request, and there's 100% funding from the state on that. So our Raise the Age budget was recently finalized, and we received the majority of requests that we asked for, and one of them is for a new probation officer. The cases starting to come in, they're very difficult and time-consuming, and with the 17-year-olds coming up, we anticipate that we're going to have more cases coming to our department. And also, we'd like to use that position to do some early intervention in the schools, to get into a couple of schools at a younger age to assist them in getting potentially at-risk youth in the right direction. So that's one of the main things that we'll be asking for, and again, that's funded 100%. So when you look at our budget, like I said, the majority of requests are similar to last year. When you go through some certain items, you will see that there are additional requests, and those happen to go with raise the age. What I've done is a little worksheet that outlines the additional expenditures to raise the age and the revenues to back it up. So everything we've asked for, which would be covered in this sheet, will simply be made up by revenue. So there are no new monies for those. We're not asking for county money to raise the age. We're looking to take advantage of the funding that's been provided to us by the state. So when you look at them, there's nothing outrageous in there. You will see that the revenue for Raise the Age is $255,792. That covers the new personnel and the different programs that we would like to do. And I think when you go down to 470s in the contract code, you will see Raise the Age, $163,968. And those are for new programs that we are hopefully going to contract with people that we've worked for the last 2 years on. So,
WCENT stands for?
Warren County Employment Training.
And you say these are reflected in the proposed budget?
They are reflected.
But this is the breakout of them?
That is the breakout. And if you want, I can go line by line.
Hit any highlights you...
The big ones are the revenue, which I just talked about in the contract. The contract code of $162,000. Those are what jumps up the expenditures, but they're based on the revenues. We are going to look to do a program with Warren County Employment Training, and we want to do a little bit of work with Mediation Matters. We want to do some things with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and those are pretty much the big ones that we want to deal with our at-risk youth. So we're looking to get a parenting class. We're looking for people that can do it for us, and mental health is a big thing. We have a lack of mental health providers in our community to deal with children and adults. We have a little money set aside. We've reached out to a couple providers to see if they're interested. So, there's talk of Northern Rivers coming up. We've already had conversations with them. Do a couple things. So we have reached out to people, and we're looking to get responses back, and we're hopeful that we can at least have a little bit of money to have some dedicated slots to our youth, because it's well needed, and there simply is no resources in the community, very little.
And the reduction in the PINs from Department of Social Services?
Yes. The other big change is we used to get $60,000 from the Department of Social Services for PINs revenue under the STSJP funding stream. Department of Social Services for the last 10 years or so has been the lead in STSJP. After numerous conversations, the probation department will assume the lead of STSJP. We will take the SJP allocation of just a little over $40,000. So we will no longer be taking money from the Department of Social Services.
Board have any questions? Chairman?
Just the raise the age Is that revenue, is that for a contract, or contract with the state?
That's per contract, and it's just finalized.
Just finalized this, so that's, okay, good, thank you.
So we did that, and last year we spent a lot of time on our Raise the Age plan, submitted it numerous times. The state seemed to change the way they wanted it. The understanding this year is they're not going to have a plan. They're just going to reallocate the money they had given you, and then what they will do in the future is to look at what you're using in prorate contracts based on the numbers of kids you have and the money you have used. So what we want to do with the people we contract is to say, we have X amount of money, our expectations for us to contract with you, obviously, we need to make some type of commitment, but on the other hand, we don't want to spend money that we don't have to spend, because in future years, we want to continue to get Raise the Age money from the state for as long as the state funds Raise the Age, which hopefully can go for a while, but working in probation and state funding is something that doesn't come to me very often, so we'll see.
And again, you have space for a new probation officer, so funded?
We will. We're having some offices redesigned. We've been in flux since the court wing has been built. Taken a couple of our offices and the majority of our waiting room. We've been displaced a little bit, but we're hoping to be back together within the near future. So I think phase 2 of the court reconstruction is going on. Myself and my secretary have an office over there, which I think they are ready to get us out there by November. So it appears that by November something will happen. So we are looking to add additional space to accommodate the additional office.
Any other questions then for Robert? Director? No?
And the other thing, while we're on it, Jason went into detail of the upcoming criminal justice reform, bail reform coming up. My department's not going to be impacted like his. However, we are a pretrial release agency, and the Office of Court Administration is the regulatory agency that oversees this law, and they will be sending out a plan to the county for the county to designate a pretrial agency within the county. I'm assuming it will be the probation department. If the county would like to designate another agency, I'd be happy to have them do that. That's probably what will happen. So, with that said, we've done pretrial for 30 years. We have the infrastructure set up for people to report to us by phone and in person. We do not have the infrastructure to take on every case that Jason talked about with release. I know that there are ongoing negotiations and conversations with the Office of Court Administration. The law has been passed, as county administrator indicated. However, the rules and regulations and guidance have not been put out yet.
And you're on the task force on guiding that?
So they indicated the guidance should come out in September. We're looking to end September relatively soon. We have a conference call later. There's members of NISAC that are on the governor's force, task force that deal directly with the negotiations, so we should have more information coming up. So for bail reform, the big push or the big ask for local probation departments of the designated pretrial service agency would be the notification piece, which we still see that as a court function, and I think that OCA is looking to maybe take that on. There's very few counties are set up to notify defendants. As Jason said, when an individual is released, that individual has to be notified in the next court date by their preference of notification, which could be email, text message, first-class mail, or a phone call. Nobody outside the state of New York, outside of the city of New York, is set up to do that. That's a big push. So again, it's hard to plan for things that we don't know what are going to happen. Manpower-wise, I think we are set up to deal with what will be asked for us. We, through the years, made things work with the staff that we have. We can reallocate positions with a new Raise the Age person that can take on some of the juvenile things that a probation assistant does. But the notification will be the big piece, and quite frankly, we don't know what that's going to be at this point. So it's hard to talk about what the financial impact may or may not be to the county. I have spoken to Judge Hobbs a couple of times, recently was yesterday, not only the city court judge, as you know, but the supervising judge of the local magistrates in this county and several other counties. We are looking to meet with our magistrates later in the year and have a plan for them in terms of what we can offer as a probation department and to see what the court's thinking is. So we want to certainly meet with them, we want to meet them halfway, we want to do whatever we can, but we may not be in the position in January 1 to do everything they need to be done pursuant to the law. So we're hoping that OCA picks up a little bit of that. And as we progress through the year, we as a probation department may be able to do more things for the court. I know the NISAC is pushing in the next state budget to have funding available to departments affected by this. So there's a lot of moving parts, and it's something that is thought about weekly in terms of how we're going to deal with it. But I think the important thing is we have the basic infrastructure. But to ask us to do 10 times the work, regardless of how much money you give us, is not going to happen on January 1st. So we will have additional meetings with the courts as we progress towards the end of the year, and we'll be in a better position to talk about what that means. So that, on top of raising the age, the 17-year-olds coming on board in October, bail reform will be our challenge with respect to how we deal with supervising pretrial release individually. We anticipate that our jail population will go down, meaning we will no longer be interviewing many people in jail. There is no validated risk assessment pursuant to this legislation that allows you to interview a defendant and give information to the court. So I'm not sure what the state expects from this, but they put a lot of people in a tough position. So hopefully we take things up there.
Well, good.
Take a look at it.
Good luck with pretrial.
Thank you. The majority of things are in the probation budget, and we had two other little budgets, pretrial budgets, just has personnel, nothing else. And then we have a day recording budget that has personnel and $1,000 for drug testing, relatively simple. If there's any questions I can answer for you on the budget, I'd be happy. With that said, a couple other things we've worked on, and we're in the process of working on with bail reform. The Office of Court Administration sent out a pretrial release survey to the counties, checking to see where they are in terms of what they have in services come January 1. I almost have that completely filled out, and what we want to impress upon the state is we're not in a position to deal with the legislation. And that's been stressed to the counties to say we do not have the infrastructure in place. So if your expectation is we're going to hit the ground January 1, being able to do this, then this is not what we have. And I think that's important for them to know, and I think that they understand that. So that message is being brought by NISAC to them clear. And the other thing we've done is in the process of working on a budget of how the criminal justice reform would affect the county. In the best case scenario, what would we need as a department to deal with all these pieces of legislation? What would Jason need as a department? So we're in the process of getting that information to NISAC so they can present budget figures to the State Division of Budget of what this means to the county. So again, this is something that was rolled out in the 11th hour. The legislature is now listening to any impact on the county, and on January 1 is going to have a big impact across the country.
Thank you. Any further questions for Robert? And my tallies here, it looks like a 7% increase over last year, what you're looking of a net. So, yeah, 92,000. Yes, Supervisor Garrity.
How many probation officers do you have now?
We currently have between probation officers and junior probation officers 15.
Supervisor McGowan.
Yes, Bob, I just want to thank you for all the inquiries and information you've given us for not really knowing what's going to be happening, and all your hard work, and being on one of the committees on orchestrating it. So I really appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you. Hopefully next year we don't have any crazy legislation to do. I'm not sure what they can do more, but I'm sure they'll do something.
Somebody else will get it. Good. Thank you. Oh, Chairman?
Just as a kind of an observation, maybe a question for our county administrator. I mean, if we don't have direct economies of scale at the jail in terms of savings to move into the places, the departments that are being affected by the new legislation, that it just becomes an additional cost to government.
Yeah, it's an unfunded mandate.
Right, and so, it seemed to me that the challenge we have now going forward is if our jail population declines, how does that impact, the operating position of the jail, to what degree? It seems to me that, some focus is going to need to take place there in that regard, but I just, as an outside observer, it just seems to me that there aren't such a kind of direct economies of scale. You cut your population in half doesn't mean the cost you cut half in half. You still have a jail to run. So it's those resources aren't available to move over. There may be some savings, maybe it's less food, and less electricity, or less, some of those kinds of things. But perhaps, so it seems to me that it'd be interesting to take on the other counties in this regard, Ryan. I know you're on the chat boards with all of them on a whole host of issues, but it'd be interesting to get their take on what their observations and experiences are with their jail and kind of opportunities to see lowering expenses.
I had dinner last night with one of them, with a jail administrator I used to work with downstate, and it may be easier for larger jails to reduce their expenses because they have more pods. They can consolidate. You have to separate men from women. You have to separate psychological risks from non-psychological risks. There's a lot of classification that's done in a jail, and the fewer pods you have, the less room you have to consolidate people that are allowed to be housed together in closed pods. So you could have one person in a pod. The state mandates the posts that you need to cover that pod, and you got to staff those posts. In a jail like ours, I would suspect that there will be some overtime-related savings initially, but there may not be any savings related to the number of full-time employees that we have to keep on the roster there. And really, in order to do that on anything more than a temporary day-to-day basis, you need the state to come in and revise your staffing plan, which is also dangerous for a smaller jail, depending on when the staffing analysis was done, because in some cases that could result in more mandated staff. There have been regulations that have come down. I don't know when the last time was that we had the state do our staffing analysis, but there have been regulations about 24/7 observation required for people that come in, really drunk or drug usage, things like that. If our staffing analysis is not up to date with all the regulations, we could end up having more mandated posts. So it's a risky thing, and we're going to have to see how it plays out next year. But I would not expect a lot of savings in regular salaries, maybe overtime.
Chairman, it's not related to this discussion, but it is related to the larger piece. I'd like to make a recommendation to the members of the board and the staff up here that we don't talk about unfunded mandates any longer. We talk about state-imposed local tax increase, because that's exactly what's happening. And I've thought about unfunded mandates before. I didn't really understand until I sit through a meeting like today and recognize that the state has imposed upon us a tax increase. And we should call it that. It's a state-imposed local tax increase.
state-imposed local tax increase.
Just a suggestion.
Well, but if you listen to the
Very
state, it's our fault, and that's why they have to keep a property tax cap to keep us in line.
Mr. Administrator, you have to understand that you're on our staff.
True. Right. Well then, we're all set. Thank you, Robert. Next up is a public defender. Defender Flores, you have the floor.
Well, good afternoon, morning, good. Okay, the first thing I have is your request to amend the county budget. As you can see on resolution request form number 7, I'm looking to move money, and I've attached below it the 3 grants that those funds are coming from, and that's what I'd like to do, is move money from
Okay.
grant to other.
Okay, that's moved by Supervisor Simpson, second by Supervisor Garrity. Any discussion on these? I do appreciate all the spreadsheets that you provide on
Easier.
these. It helps.
It's easier for
see it.
me, so it's gotta be easier for you guys.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well, call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. The next thing is I'd like to request authorization to create a fake Facebook account with IT for us to use for investigations. Law enforcement does that. IT
Okay.
and Facebook will not allow us to do it unless we have authorization to do it. Obviously, we're trying to defend my clients, and I need not to have the account saved from the public defender's office because that may not get all the information I would like, versus if we have a fake account, obviously that would be controlled very tightly by myself and my investigator, so that it's not being used for outside sources. It's for us, for our investigation in our case.
Who would like to bring that to the floor? Supervisor Wild?
Okay.
What was that? You looked like you...
I have a concern, but yes,
Oh.
I'll bring it to the floor so I can
We have
raise my concern.
Supervisor Morlino on the second. Discussion. Supervisor Wild?
Thank you. Can you talk publicly about how this is going to be used? And I worry about things like entrapment and I have this big brother kind of mentality that I think about sometimes when some of this happens, and I'm just curious what the controls are. And
Right. Somebody has a Facebook account, we want to see what they're posting on it so we can see. Often, clients or witnesses will post one thing in Facebook and then another, I'm sorry, there's a whole bunch of ways, and then another in terms of giving it to other people. And we'd like to just see what's going out there, because the DA's office, obviously, in terms of discovery, can't get that from them. They're not law enforcement, they're not required to get that source. DA's office has to get paper and information from law enforcement. We're trying to figure out what other people are saying and then changing their stories on it. Because when an incident occurs, someone might have said prior to the incident or as it's occurring something, and then later on changes it. It's important to know what that original was, because it may affect our defense.
just to follow up, do we trust what anybody says on Facebook? It's just, you don't have to answer that.
Yeah, thank
But
you.
I understand the principle of where you're trying to go.
And I imagine this request stems from past experience.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Are there other public defenders using the same approach?
Yes. And in fact, that's how I figured out how to do it from others.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? Any questions? Call the question. All those in favor for the Facebook?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Now I'd like to talk about the budget, and everybody else says doom and gloom, and I am not doom and gloom. I have stood up here before and told you I'm doing everything I can to keep the county funding to a minimum. We have not asked for any additional county funding from 18 and 19. All the additional funding are from the grants. Remember when I come in here every month saying, I need this grant, I want this. So all our additional spending is coming from our grants. So we have 13 grants and distributions that we are working with. So it's a lot of moving parts. So as you look through our budget, as you get towards the back, you will see the salary structure. Obviously, that needs to date of hires for people, what we'd like for the 2020 salary versus what we have now. And then the last sheet indicates where that money is coming from, what grant, because if I don't list what grant, it's really hard. So I don't really have any specific things I wanted to address to you other than I am not using county funding, we're just using grant funding for our adjustments.
And it looks like it's an increase of $450,000 on your revenues, roughly speaking, over last year.
tough time on the
Yeah. And as Supervisor Wild?
I guess Marcy, I understand what you're saying about bringing in all the grants. I just don't understand this page 1 of 1. It says your total in expenses are going to be 1.2 million and your revenues are 700,000. It sounds like a $500,000 gap.
Well, we also have more of the last page.
Yeah, Supervisor Wild, it was an $835,000 gap last year. So this year they've closed it by $294,000 with a 55% reduction in cost to the county. Supervisor Garrity?
Well, isn't it because you get grants during the year and you may get some revenues that come in later on?
Right, correct. And
So you can't show them till you...
Until I have, and in fact, this past week, I sent you all out another email about another grant I got. I'm very excited every time I get them, and I need to let you know when I get them, but I try to give you just the bottom dollar number, so you don't have to I attach all the other stuff with it, but I try to, in the first line, tell you the amount. So that's why. And I do appreciate everyone allowing me to apply for every grant that I've applied for, and I haven't missed one. And we are working very hard with the county administrator to deal with Nate and the treasurer's office and with Mr. Thomas to get this done the right way and to use the funds the most objectively and the best effectiveness for the county.
Supervisor Driscoll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier in the year, Marcy, you had some concerns about staff retention, and certainly I think that's addressed in the proposed salaries for this coming year. Is your comfort level a little bit higher?
Yes,
or?
it is. And there's another employee that I would like to hire. She has not been sworn in, and I can't make an offer to anyone until they're sworn in. She will be sworn in November 20th, so I'm hoping to make her an offer on that day, and then I will have full staff. In the coming year, obviously, I'm looking to, as we talked about before, is hire a supervising attorney, which is called the coordinating attorney, an additional part-time detective investigator. Unlike the DA's office, we have one who works 2 days a week, and they have 3 who work so they have somebody working every day and I don't. And so that would be a big piece for us. In addition, future down the line with another grant, with the next distribution, we would like another secretary. I still haven't hired the part-time secretary because we're waiting for the equipment to come in. In terms of the DA's office with digitalization, we have to digitize also, so that's part of what we have equipment to purchase with that, a desk. We've gotten the quotes for all the furniture. Remember, I had asked that once I get grant funding in for Harrell Herring, that I could then put in purchase orders for the furniture. We've just gotten that funding in, so we're having that going. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts to get the office back in terms of, to me, in a position where we can do more. When we get the digital stuff from the DA's office, it's only good for 30 days, so we have to download it, we have to put it into our case tracking system or a folder that, where we need it to. So we also have been working with Mike Colvin in IT and then communicating. I tell him in terms of things that issues for me, he communicates with Jason because I don't want to overstep Jason's area. And our case tracking systems are designed off of the same kind of basis. He's a prosecution case tracking management system, and we have public defense case tracking management system. So there are similar kinds of things, keeping all these data together. So it's a lot of information to deal with.
Supervisor McGowan?
No, don't have any questions. Marcy, no, she's
Your
just
hand was up there.
nailing it.
I told you I'd work hard on this, and I promised you I would. So. Any questions from anybody else?
We're good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to have just a 5-minute break. And then next up is Fire Prevention Building Code. But we'll be right back.
What a pleasant morning.
Stretch your legs.
Some of these poor department heads have been here all morning.
Yeah.
So,
Yes?
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
I have minimal changes this year, so
Yeah, I can run through a couple of highlights of things, but, I mean, it's very small amounts of money, you know, 400, page 2 and 3, increase in gas, increase in travel and education. But really, overall, very small changes, so, you guys look through it, any questions?
Any questions for Charles? And overall, we're looking at $15,000 increase over last year, 5% increase. Out of a $514,000 budget.
No revenue increases this year. Building permit.
You know, and that's always a tough one to project, because what does the economy do? You're faring pretty well this year, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. We'll surpass the adopted revenues number for 2019. As things stand right now, I kind of want to go the higher than $202,500.
If there's no other questions, then. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Attaboy, Charlie.
Good morning.
So,
Sorry.
Assigned counsel.
Hello.
Joy.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Had that wind blown
Thank you.
racing up the stairs.
Now, we didn't have, yeah, and this wasn't posted online,
This was not posted online. You can ask Ryan.
okay?
Oh, please. You're welcome. There means requested, but.
Uh-huh.
Have one Ryan already?
I think so, Joy.
About inventory?
I don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Joy. Huge, huh?
They sold out of
Please
the
access
bids.
agenda.
And the
What?
they sold out of
Please
the
access
government.
agenda.
I mean, it's a balloon festival.
Depends on eBay.
You know,
Put it on eBay already?
to the very end.
The one was a 2016, by the old ones, it must have been a rainy year.
It's Brian.
No.
Good, Joy, thank you.
Now,
We're losing our committee, we gotta go.
yeah,
Okay, move on.
wish I had this earlier. This is a lot. And we have Office Emergency Service and sheriffs have been waiting here all
Well,
whole
I
time
can come
for-
back when you're done, that's fine with me.
Could you?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That would be
No
good.
problem.
We'll call you.
See you
Let's get
later.
to the changes,
We'll
man.
pull up next, Office of Emergency Services. Brian, you have the floor.
I've been asked to be as quick as Charlie was with that.
You said you would be.
Is that what I said?
Going through the agenda, the first item, the only action item I have on the agenda is we need to amend a contract we have with the company that does the physicals for our hazmat team members. And they have raised their fees from $160 to $240. It's been stayed the same since 2010, and they finally have asked to increase that. So
Who'd like to bring that to the floor? Supervisor Simpson, second by Supervisor McGowan. And you think these are reasonable rates, Director LaFleur?
we have been working the last 2.5 months to find anyone else to bid on this.
Okay.
Including hospitals and other locations, and so far, this appears to be the best deal, so.
Okay. Any other questions for the Director? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And we'll be paying for that change for 2019 out of our hazmat contingency fund, so
Okay.
we don't require any additional dollars for that. Okay, the budget. If you want me to do this the easy way, I can tell you that we have had changes as far as one ad and several reductions. The bottom line is we are budget neutral. There's a $50,000 difference, and that was because of money we received for the vehicle fund that was put into our budget from the vehicle reserve. We don't need that again, so that's where we stand. I'll be glad to answer any questions that anyone has.
Do you have any?
The Fire Training Center, when you look at that budget, remember that we are the fiduciary for the training center, but half of everything we spend out of that line gets reimbursed by Washington County.
We're looking at about a $2,600 difference on all of your budgets combined. Yeah. Out of $429,000 worth of expenses. Pretty tight.
Yeah, pretty tight. That is pretty neutral, isn't it?
So,
Any major equipment expenditures that we do it through our Homeland Security grant. We get $60,000 a year for that.
you foresee anything you'll need for the new building that OES is scheduled to have here?
Well, I don't have a good answer for that. Not knowing where we're going to come in with that and what's going to happen, but we'll have to address that when we get to that. There will be, I will mention this because I think it needs to be mentioned, there are going to be some changes in the layout of our office. With my departure, there will be changes in how our office is set up and the way that the job positions are set up due to the requirements for the fire coordinator and what's involved there and under law. So I'm working with the county administrator, civil service, and HR to get all those together, and we'll see where that ends up. I doubt it will have any change in the budget other than perhaps a reduction. Any other questions?
Any other further questions for Director LaFleur? Hearing none? Thank you, Brian.
Oh, was that all right?
Hope that was worth a 2.5 hour wait, but...
That's all right. My time is your time.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Next, we'll call up the sheriff office, and Sheriff, you give the floor here to Major LaFar.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Welcome. Yeah. And Jim's been working on the budget here for the sheriff's office and is getting up to speed on things. So.
Yes, and before I get into that, for those who have not been part of the budget workshop, I would like to say thank you. You've all been extremely patient, very helpful. I've received tremendous guidance, and I sincerely appreciate that. Before I touch on the budget specifically, there are a few items. I had prepared a request for resolution form number 10 for transfer of funds. In our last budget workshop, it was discussed that the budget officer would decide what funds we'd do the transfers from. We have some shortfalls in overtime in law enforcement, shortfalls in overtime in corrections, and current shortfalls and projected additional shortfalls for the year. So I believe I'm asking for a conceptual approval for budget amendments to transfer funds with the budget officer making the determination as to which codes they would come from in these entities, personal funds.
So, looking at Frank here, or is there, because we don't have any forms in the packet here.
I prepared a form, and it was suggested that I not utilize that form just until the determination was made as to which funds they would be transferred from.
Okay.
Yeah, we got two things going on here. One is the typical transfer that would occur this time of year for, typical overruns. but we're also going to be short due to the interest arbitration. We have not yet moved. We remember we had over $300,000 in contingency for that, which we didn't move. We wanted to wait until the end of the year, see how the budget played out. So I did my own projections as to where I think these accounts will end up at the end of the year. I would like to talk to the sheriff about those first. But I have us being about $220,000 short in patrol regular salaries, about $260,000 short in overtime, and $140,000 short in part-time. Now, especially the part-time, I'm just not sure if that's going to make any sense. I'm doing a rough projections here, so I'd like to go over those numbers with the department first. And then over in the jail, I'm projecting about a $60,000 shortfall in overtime, but that we will have funding left over on the jail side in both part-time and in regular. So what we're seeking conceptual approval to do is using a combination of those regular time and part-time codes in the jail, plus the PBA interest arbitration contingency, to transfer out of those three different sources what we need to plug the other accounts. And I believe that we will, at the end of the day, still have between $50,000 and $75,000 untouched in that contingency account. But, yeah.
Supervisor.
Brian, how much is projected, how much, so we're talking about moving $600,000, basically, if I did the quick math here, right? $620,000 based on your numbers.
Well, I'm projecting about 275 from the contingency. Otherwise, it's all within the sheriff's budget.
So we're moving 275 out of the contingency. It's only going to leave us 50 left?
It's not the regular contingency. This is the contingency that was set up to deal with the PBA interest arb. So the interest arbitration resulted in back wages being paid out for years when they were out of contract. We've been paying that. We paid the retros already, and we're paying the new pay rates based on that interest arbitration. The only thing is we didn't adjust the budget to pull money from outside of the sheriff's budget from that labor contingency into the sheriff's budget. We wanted to give it some time and see how it would work out within the existing appropriations.
And for background on this, Ryan, we were in negotiations. The contract was up. We started this year. We just carried forward with what the last year's pay schedule was.
Right.
It took months to be able to decide, and then we paid that all back. And
Right. Right. So at the end of the day, when I say we're leaving $50,000 to $75,000 in contingency, again, if my part-time doesn't make any sense and we can drop that back, we'll leave more. That represents what we are under budget for this year. We've appropriated a certain amount to deal with this, knowing we were going to have to deal with it, and we'll be under budget.
So I'm sorry, just so I'm clear, the contingency we had was for this settlement with the PBA,
Correct.
right? That's been settled. So this is just money that we can easily move. It's not committed right now for anything else.
Right.
It's just a contingency kind of reserve.
Right. Yeah.
So we're lucky.
No.
Or, no, I'm sorry, budget officer, no, we budgeted for it. Okay. That's what I meant. I was trying to say I apologize because I recognized that you had this under control.
So not like we're prepared.
Okay. So what action does the committee need to take today?
The committee needs to give conceptual approval for the finance committee to work out exactly what the details are. But the sources, so funding is going to move into all three personnel lines in the road patrol. It's going to move out of the overtime, it's also going to move into the overtime in the jail. And the funding to make those transfers is going to move out of three different places. It'll move out of the regular salaries in the jail, the part-time salaries in the jail, and the labor contingency that we set up to handle the shortfall.
We need a motion for that?
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. By Supervisor Wild, second on Supervisor Hogan. Supervisor Merlino. What, did you have a comment, or?
No, I wanted to second it.
Oh, okay.
Supervisor.
I don't know. He was looking at the back. Yesterday, same thing, they said, I raised my hand, and they said, Hogan, she looked at me, and I'm like, hey.
Okay. Any further discussion on this motion where we're basically moving it to finance?
Right.
To really decide.
Right.
Call the question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, motion carries.
Next item is a request to fill a vacancy for senior account clerk at the Sheriff's Office. This was something that was brought to the full board last Friday. We currently, with that approval, have a vacancy. I prepared a request resolution form number 12 that was delivered to HR. I did not bring it with me. I'm hoping that perhaps copies came upstairs.
I didn't hear the question, I'm sorry.
The resolution form number 12 was delivered downstairs to personnel. I did not get a copy.
We have it.
Okay. you have it.
But a notice to intent to fill a vacant position for senior account clerk number 7.
Yeah.
Okay. Base salary $39,216.24 first year. So, moved by Supervisor Simpson, second by Supervisor Merlino? Thank you. That's not here. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The next item is our request for a resolution to amend the county budget. It was a check that we received for insurance recovery for snow and ice damage to the Gore Mountain site. That check's been received, it's just a matter of transferring the funds, and that form is included in the packet.
Okay, Supervisor Simpson, Supervisor Garrity on the second. Hope that wasn't due to snowmaking or anything like that. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Just 2 quick points before we get into the budget. Our correctional facility, we are still currently have 2 vacancies. Our correctional administration is working diligently to fill those. We've had some people come in for interviews, and they've come along in the process only to turn the position down, but we are working to fill those vacancies. And our current inmate population as of this morning was 99.
Good. And this is probably the lowest on vacancies we've had for a while, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Good. And that's because we now have a list to work on, right? Wasn't there something that...
We've always had a list.
Yeah, okay.
The refresh list.
Okay. Yeah, Supervisor Wild.
I just have a question about our inmate population. I'm just curious what percentage of our capacity is being used by those. And if I'm not mistaken, some of inmates come from other agencies, other counties?
Federal inmates, no other counties.
Federal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, federal inmates. Yeah. The only revenues that we obtain is through federal government by housing federal inmates.
Right.
We have, I think, we've been having anywhere from 7 to 10.
And it's consistent over time? Okay. And as far as our utilization, 99 out of potential of how many?
186.
186. So
Maximum.
55%, something like that.
It's the lowest it's been in 12 years since I've been here. And I think that's going to be a norm.
Right.
January 1 starting and new bail reform, so it's going to be the norm. I'd say 100 is going to be around 100.
Any other questions before we go to budget? Major Parr, would you like to introduce your group?
Just my apologies. This is Terry Como. Terry Como is the Warren County Coroner. He's a funeral director, local resident of Glens Falls, and Terry will serve as our undersheriff come January 1st. My apologies. Thank you.
Yep. Good to have you, Terry.
Welcome, Terry. So you're going to do double duty, right? You're going to be a coroner also?
No, that's wrong, I figured that out.
We too have 3 separate budgets. I'll touch on each one individually and just give over the high points, answer any questions I may. First one is the 911 Center, 3020. Under the revenue codes, we're projected a slight increase for 1142 for the wireless telephones, and that's because the truck phone systems are now paying those surcharges. We did have a significant loss, however. The city of Glens Falls, their service contract expired. Their last year was this year, so we will not be receiving that $140,000 from the city of Glens Falls. The remainder are pretty minor. There's an increase. The fiber that was delivered to 3 of our sites was done through DANK, the Development Authority of the North Country, and for the first 3 years, the monthly fees have been waived, but those are going to start being billed for those. So that's going to increase the budget code for 428 data processing internet fees an amount of $2,100 a month, or $25,200 annually. It's not reflected under the 100 codes for communications, and I won't go into great detail. I know we spoke of it at length in the budget workshops, but under communications, we're asking for 1 additional communication officer. That person we would pull from our experienced staff to work with a uniformed sergeant to work through the discovery process. Currently, the sheriff's office will have an obligation to gather all telephone recordings, all radio transmissions, anything that comes through our communications center relating to the Warren County Sheriff's Office, the New York State Police, the Glens Falls Police Department, and Bolton Police Department. We'll have to capture, preserve, and provide all of that information to the District Attorney's Office for discovery in turn to go to the Public Defender's Office. That is something we're working on now. We are slowly getting into that process, and communications is very time-consuming. When a radio transmission occurs, there isn't anything that's tagged to make it specific to a certain call. So if we receive a 911 call of an accident on the interstate, the New York State Police are handling it, and we dispatch EMS and telephone service or emergency services, we have to have somebody go in at the time that first call was received and search every telephone call, every radio transmission, earmark that, pull it out, put it into a file, store it, and send it over to District Attorney Carasone's office. And again, we have to do that for every single arrest that's made. They're going to prosecute. It's a significant burden. In speaking with our communications supervisor now, the same way that DA Carasone said, we're going to do our best with 1 additional person if you are so graciously willing to grant that. But we have concerns that that might not be enough. But we will do our best to get through it with 1 additional person if that's approved.
Supervisor Wild. Chairman, I'm just going to elaborate on something that Jason said earlier. I was left with the impression it was just your office, guys, the sheriff's office, that was going to have to be providing the data. But we have Glens Falls Police and Bolton Police. How tightly are they hooked into what we're doing?
I can't speak to the other agencies and what they're doing.
Well, the state police would be the big one. They get a lot of calls. They don't have to do it. They don't run the 911 center. We run the 911 center, so anything that they do, anytime they call into the 911 center, anytime somebody calls to make a complaint that a crime has been committed and they investigate it, we dispatch them. All the onus is going to be on us to get that information out of the system. It's not going to be on the state police department or any other police department.
So if you don't mind, this is more like that workflow stuff that I was talking about before. How do we categorize each call that comes in? Or do we actually have somebody re-listening to all these conversations?
Somebody physically has to go in and listen. They have to look for the time that the call was initially generated. In that example, an accident on the interstate, if there's an arrest for DWI, you go back to the first radio transmission, the first telephone call, and you start searching that window, and you get a lengthy call, a homicide or something like that. It is everything.
And just so you know, we've already started. We started doing that. We have tasked this to be. We've talked to Jason about this. Jimmy and I've talked to Jason, and with the felonies, they're starting to do with most of it. They're starting to categorize it, preparing for January 1. I took it a little further with Jason. I said, listen, any of the misdemeanors, the lesser crimes that you see that you want, call us, and we task a sergeant to oversee that with a communications officer to see what it's going to take. And Jimmy's going to make sure that they log their time between now and January to see how much time it's going to take, so we at least have some of an idea of how long it's going to take and what kind of manpower it's going to take. So we've already started doing it.
Yeah, it's crazy, you're right, Mike, you need somebody to do this work. And that's just the communications portion of it. Thinking about public safety, we've been looking at body cameras for a number of years. And I think it's safe to say that we would not move forward with body cameras at this point. Something that would be a benefit to the prosecution, a benefit to public safety, just because of this added burden. The amount of extra manpower it would require to collect that data, preserve it, it's overwhelming.
And if you recall, we were looking to do the body cameras a few years ago, but there's a lot of money involved, and at the time, the committee chose not to fund it, so we did do the research on
And on this communication center, you cover fire, EMS, and state troopers. Everything comes through the center.
Cell phone calls, yeah.
it. Glens Falls Police, between the state police and Glens Falls Police, that's huge. And us, of course, but
Sure.
you still have to manage any calls that come in from Glens Falls and the state troopers.
Any further questions on the 911 on the 911 center?
I mean, there is no way, really, when a phone call comes in, to put it into a certain file, is there, with the system that we have? I mean, it's just a continuous tape.
It's secured in electronic digital format.
Right,
So
but
we
I
can
mean-
gather that, we pull that one specific time piece out. So if you call, there may be 5 bits of information that relate to your telephone call. We'd have to pull all 5 of those.
Right, I mean, you just can't, at the time, put it over here in a...
No, and that would be nice if we could take a window, the call started at 9 a.m. and we know it concluded at 11:30 and just grab that entire piece, but we would be releasing information that I'm sure would be sensitive, not relevant to the investigation, the arrest. It's just, we thought about that, it's an easy way to do it, but not appropriate.
Is your hand up there, Supervisor McGowan, or?
No.
Mind if you don't mind, really quickly,
But wow.
refresh my memory about the 140,000 we used to get from Glens Falls, now we're not getting it anymore.
That was for us to dispatch their emergency calls for service. We took over their 911 calls, and it was a 7 year?
7 years.
And they're doing it now?
Sure, yes, we are.
So, but we're not responsible to record the 911 for Glens Falls any longer?
Yes.
Yeah,
We are.
That was a revenue. That was a revenue that we got from the city of
Right.
Glens Falls. They agreed to pay the county $140,000 to take over dispatch. So for the 3 dispatchers that we hired from Glens Falls, there was an expense side, which is, was a large expense side. They agreed to pay the $140,000 over a number of years, and then it was to go away.
It was shared services grant, part of that shared services program.
So it's just a revenue.
No, I understand, but now we're responsible for tracking all this data that comes in from Glens Falls?
We always have that.
Okay.
But now we gotta do it for free.
Oh. Other county. Play nice.
I wasn't going there.
And Major, the request you intend to make for another communications officer, is there a price tag on that yet?
Yeah.
Roughly?
$47,287.
Thanks.
Other questions for communications? I'll move into law enforcement. Law enforcement must remain pretty consistent. Obviously, salaries, something we think are going to increase. There is, under 250, there was an item that was mentioned. It was live scan upgrade for the Chester server, $22,500. That is something that in the budget workshop, there was discussion about potentially taking care of that this year, so that may not be included. There's a project to replace that started early this year to replace all the exterior LED lights at the public safety complex and correctional facility. We had received a quote of $37,240 to do that work, and I've learned that the actual amount to the county would be just over $29,000. What's happening is Hill Electric would purchase all of that. There'd be reimbursement through National Grid of just over $8,000. So the actual amount would be $29,000 and change. And then there would be a recovery of those expenditures, they estimate, in roughly 3 years' time with having LED lighting systems in place. It's not reflected under the 100 codes, but this would be the second ask from the sheriff's office, and we would be seeking a patrol sergeant's position, and this again would relate to discovery. We've made some administrative adjustments, and we were able to save money with the current staffing by moving positions around. This is something, again, that's outside our control, and the reason for a patrol sergeant, you need to have somebody that would have a level of supervisory access to not just paperwork and narratives, but also surveillance systems to interview and interrogation recordings. This person would work Monday through Friday, work the same hours as our district attorney's office, and do nothing but gather police, law enforcement related records and data. Again, secure those, provide those to the district attorney's office, and be responsible to coordinate and facilitate everything with them. The reason for a patrol sergeant is because when things are working perfectly, you might be able to get away with a patrol officer or perhaps a clerk. But when you have officers who are not timely in their reporting or not timely in their submissions, I think it's vital to have someone in a supervisory role who can ensure that these deadlines and these timelines are being met, because they're very strict, 15 days from the time of arraignment, and if we miss these, like D.A. Carousel explained earlier, we're in jeopardy of losing cases. So it's our position that a patrol sergeant is absolutely vital to serve this purpose.
And they would be dedicated to that job.
Specific to that job, and there's been a lot of movement, and there would continue to be some movement, but the person who we would see serving in this role, as the sheriff stated, is already working in this capacity somewhat now to try to get a handle on things, working very closely with the Caseload, and it seems to be going in a positive direction. It's a little funky, our systems are clunky, but we're making do, and we'll get there, we'll figure it out. Again, it was brought up in the budget workshops that maybe we could have a plan B or an alternate option. I don't foresee any plan B or any other alternative that we could do to get around this hurdle. If we were working through it and it was learned 6 months through the year that we didn't need it, then we would come back and revisit, doing something differently, but I don't foresee that happening. The way I'd like to see this work is that communications officer and this patrol sergeant working hand in hand on a day-to-day basis and knowing each other's roles so that they work in harmony, and they are the two primary contacts at the sheriff's office for our district attorney's office, serving essentially as a liaison.
And again, that's not reflected in the 100s code of the law enforcement budget.
That's correct.
And the price on a new sergeant?
$78,519.
Any questions on the law enforcement budget here? I think right now it's at about a $468,000 increase over last year, which is about 5%. It's a big budget, $12 million budget here. Okay. No questions? We'll go on to corrections.
Yes, our third final piece is corrections, and again, most portions stay pretty consistent. Currently for the year, we are up, I think we're around $190,000 for inmate boarding, so we projected a little higher as far as revenues go for next year. We projected a little lower in our meals, just based upon, we think early on in the year, maybe January for the first several months, that we will have a decline in the inmate population, knowing that once defendants start getting adjudicated and become sentenced, they will return, but it would just be a decrease temporarily, so we may see a decrease in the food costs. You may see on your sheets under 250, an additional amount of $120,000. That's to replace a camera switch in the correctional facility. This is an item that it's really past its functional use. In speaking with Mark Neal, it's something that really needs to be replaced. But going through the budget workshops, it's something, again, that there was discussion about potentially being able to purchase that with money through the 2019 budget. So that may not remain in there. In corrections, there would be no ask for any additional positions. And I know the conversation has come up at length about the reduction of our staff, potentially closing housing units. And, as was discussed today, I don't foresee that happening. I think that there may be a reduction in the overtime expenses. We'll have a better handle on that as we get through our first few months, starting January 1st.
Any questions on corrections?
I will say I've touched on this with Administrator Moore, and I don't know the Commission of Corrections. I'm assuming they're going to get requests from correctional facilities and sheriffs across the state. I would be willing to do anything we can to be creative with our population, to work with adjacent counties, and if it's something that the Commission would see to approve, to house inmates from one facility into another for cost savings benefits, we would be willing to try anything.
Again, on corrections here, another big budget item. You have a $700,000 expense budget here with only an $88,000 increase, or 1% increase on corrections. So, Administrator Moore.
I would just defer to the budget officer on whether we want to handle those two pieces at this meeting or whether we want to do that in the future, the $120,000 for the camera switch and the $22,500 for the live scan for Chester.
I think we should wait until we see what we have left from the PBA.
Okay.
No other questions then for Major LaFar? Thank you very much. Good to see you here.
Good job, Jim. Jerry?
We need it.
Bud?
Are we done?
No.
No, we got more. More.
Do we have Ron?
Hey,
Oh, I'm sorry, you have Ron.
referral.
First one down. In the workshop, I didn't like saying I don't know.
October 21st.
I'll ask.
That those will be approved by a 2/3 majority. Or we're creating an official.
Right.
I would be hesitant to try and do anything for the actually.
Said something about bringing in the A-team.
I owe you a coffee, thanks.
Guess if you have to leave, I gotta be out of here in 20 minutes. Got a budget meeting on my own to go to.
Oh, my phone is dying.
That's the only thing that's Mine is what to do with that jail.
Joy, you have the floor. Thank you for accommodating us.
No worries, you could have called sooner, I always volunteer to go last.
Okay. What would you like to do first here?
Well, let's do the
Budget
budget, get
amendments?
that over with, I think.
What's that?
Address the budget first,
Okay.
because there's a couple of things in the agenda that are going to change it, so.
There it is. So, any changes in the budget revenues?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Tammy on a lot of this, because she's got all the numbers.
Thank
Oh.
you. Okay, so Joy's budget, what she's included in the revenues, are revenues that she'll get from year one of ground caring, funding, that's the year one of the 5-year plan, for all the expenses that are currently budgeted under her budget group. And that's in the amount of $45,413.58. And you'll see a note on this, on her second page of her budget on the bottom, under 3045, that's where her revenues, the state revenue code is, and there's a detail of the revenues that are included in there. Where she also will collect state aid is for reimbursement for contracts that she has with the Rural Law Center and the Legal Aid Society, spread over a couple of different distributions that oil has, and then portions of the part-time clerk. Any expense that's attributed to the part-time clerk over the initial $5,000.
But those,
That's her revenue code.
those are not listed in the budget sheet here. We just have the 114,000.
Right, the 114,289.68, right. Then you should have a budget sheet that, with revenue code, Joy?
Yeah, it does.
let's
It explains it right here.
Right here.
Right there. It's all explained on your next page.
Okay, that one, okay. It was broken down, the 114 was, okay, thank you for all that, thank you. Okay.
Any questions on anything else? Expenses, et cetera? It's gone up very minimally. Basically, I'm just waiting to amend the budget to put these monies in so I can do some hiring and get us online with according to what Oils wants.
Anybody have any questions? Okay.
Oh, you mean Don last? Now I'm disappointed. Okay, next is the budget amendment, I guess, if you want to move forward.
Yes, we do.
Okay, that's to accept the money from the Burrell Herring.
To make the motion.
By Supervisor Garrity, second by Supervisor Simpson. Motion to accept money.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Or
Opposed? None. Motion carries.
Okay, number 3, contract for new supervising attorney. This again is based on Burrell Herring Fund and/or assorted distributions from all the messy thing that the state gives us that has money
Okay.
attached. It's going to be a part-time position, probably 8 hours a month to start. I don't know exactly how much I'll use this attorney, but basically he'll be used to have questions on conflicts when I can't get a straight answer from another entity. Also to be as a mediator between attorneys if there's issues with clients and things of that nature, which we've never had before, which is always supposed to happen in place.
Brought to the floor by Supervisor McGowan, second by Supervisor Wild. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Great when you guys are tired out. Perfect.
You better go for it, Joy.
And now I want to create and fill 2 positions also. Again, this has to do with all the funding that we're getting from the state. I want to give change my part-time clerk to a part-time account clerk. Comes with a grade 4, and she needs a salary increase because she's doing all the billing, all the vouchering. We have a new program coming in, which is going to be part of the budget. It's going to have to be a complete culture shock for everybody associated, boards, applicants, attorneys, in charge of that program.
Okay, so we're creating the position, but
Right.
we're by Supervisor Simpson, seconded by Supervisor Wild. But you're switching the employee, is that correct?
So we're deleting one position and creating another?
No, we're keeping the one position.
Okay.
There is funding coming that will fill the part-time position of part-time clerk.
But
So
are
I
you,
basically will have one whole person.
okay,
So a part-time clerk and a part-time account clerk, going to have separate duties.
but are you, so the current, I thought you said you wanted to make the current, have the current person fill
Part-time
this.
moved up to a part-time account clerk.
Okay, so you're gonna essentially promote her into what we're creating and then leave the other one?
Vacant, correct.
Okay, okay. And the effective date for this, it would have to be after the
That's fine.
October meeting?
Yep, that's fine. Immediately, but that's good.
Okay,
And the next is the part-time grant administrator, which,
let's vote on,
oh, sorry.
so all those in favor of creating a new position of part-time account clerk, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, next is part-time grant administrator. Working with Trish to find out what the grade is according to the state and the salaries to be determined, but it's gonna be less than part-time, so it's not gonna be a big expense, but that also will be paid for with grant funds and/or her Alvarian monies. She was the grant administrator for OEF. She recently stepped down, and she agreed last year to fill this position. That's how long I've been waiting.
By Supervisor McGowan, second by Supervisor Conover. Any discussion on this? Is that a competitive?
No,
Other?
non-competitive.
Okay, none. Good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Yeehaw. Oh.
Supervisor Moore.
And just bring us back to the budget amendment with what we just created with those two positions, that was included in the budget amendment, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And just for my own information, Mr. Chairman, and there's a revenue against that.
100%.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Motion.
Any other to bring before the committee at this time? Joy, anything else?
I want to raise, but now it's not the time, right?
So,
No, we want to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
all those, might be. Okay, motion to adjourn by Supervisor Wild, second by Supervisor McGowan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank
Good
you.
work, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Have a nice
You can bring
day.
that up
Thank
later.
you.
Ryan, I'm running.